What is up? What is up, everybody? Thank you for joining another episode of the Insomniacs Livestream with your host, myself, Dr. Andrew Kim, MD. I am a board certified psychiatrist, and thank you to all my subscribers who subscribe to my channel, who've been supporting me over the years. For those of you who are new, this is the live stream component of my YouTube channel here as a psychiatrist. We do live streams every Tuesday night and every Saturday night, 10:30 Central, 10:30 p.m. Central, 11:30 p.m. Eastern. And right now, today, we are doing a Ask a Psychiatrist or Ask the Psychiatrist episode, meaning we don't have a set agenda for today. Today is literally just a free-flowing open-ended Q&A, and if there's only several viewers here, then the nice part is you could ask all the questions you want. So for those of you who are joining for the first time, we welcome you, and we're going to keep it nice and easy. And obviously I have a few filler topics we can talk about, if there aren't too many questions coming in. So there were a couple questions that came in even before this, because I did post on the channel posts or commentary to start sending in some questions. I did get a couple questions. One was related to mental health and psychiatry. The other was some random questions. So let's get started. So a couple questions that came in even before the live stream started. One was about someone was asking, what is this over here in the background? I guess right over there, actually. Someone was asking me if I had some kind of DVD collection, a collection of tapes or something. It's actually trading cards. So, it's a wasteful hobby of mine. I've used the word wasteful. It's a wasteful hobby of mine, collecting sports collectible trading cards. Back in the day when I was a kid, I'm born in 1982. So in the, 80s, early 90s, I used to collect basketball cards, baseball cards. I'm a diehard Cubs fan back in the 80s. So if you're a Chicagoan and you remember the Chicago Cubs of the days of old, this was like Ryan Sandberg, Mark Grace, Andre Dawson, Sean Dunston. These were the guys I used to follow. And of course, the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan in the heyday of the repeat three-peats. And then, I kind of stopped collecting cards for a long time. And only in the last like 3 years or so, I guess, got back into it, started going to trade shows, National Card Convention. So that's what's in the background over there. It's not, I don't know why people have asked me several times if that's like some kind of DVD collection or tape collection, but it's sports trading cards. Let me see if I could find some here. So, yeah, I collect all kinds of sports cards, basketball, football, but, mixed martial arts and even women's tennis. I actually watch a lot of women's tennis. So this is like, if you follow women's tennis, this is Iga Swiatek, and this is, who is this? Arina Sabalenka, some of the best players out there for women's tennis. And just things, again, I like trading them, buying them, selling them, going to conventions. So that's kind of what's there in the background. So that was a random question. Didn't expect that one. Another subscriber asked the following, and I guess this is an interesting, I don't know, under the radar question. A topic that's been getting a little bit more attention lately. And oddly enough, I even had a family member of someone I'm treating recently ask me this similar question. So I'm not sure if there was some kind of recent publication that's made its circulation in like the mass media or pop media magazines, but someone asked me the question. This was the question that someone submitted. Said, is there any evidence that the supplement creatine, so creatine is kind of most widely known, I think, in most of our lay public society as a workout supplement. So some people use it to just get more energy during their workouts, more stamina, more, sustained power over the course of weightlifting, etc. So creatine, that's kind of what it's most well known for. Creatine could be found on the shelves of GNC, Vitamin Shop, wherever you go, basically to buy supplements. And some use, a subscriber asked, is there any evidence, and they heard, through social media, that there may be some emerging evidence of creatine having some potential antidepressant properties being used in depression. So looked into it a little bit, even had some articles that other people sent me, again, randomly by chance. I was looking into this as well. And again, keywords, I want to be careful. Keywords are, yeah, there's some small, set of evidence, some preliminary evidence that warrants more research. Okay, I'm going to preface it by that, maybe there are enough, potential theoretical properties of creatine, and there's at least some preliminary small findings of creatine, maybe having some potential to at least augment antidepressant effects, even augment other antidepressant interventions in clinical depression or major depressive disorder. One of the studies that I saw that was probably one of the most cited ones was actually one that was conducted in Korea. So shout out to Korea. Um, Interestingly, it was done in women, and I guess from previous theoretical models, animal models, they thought maybe that women in particular might have more of a propensity or sensitivity to maybe have a response to some of the theoretical models of how creatine could produce an antidepressant effect. So it was a very small study. I believe the total sample size was only about 50 patients, maybe 30 some odd patients completed the study. And essentially, they were looking at one subgroup of patients who were just on kind of your typical SSRIs, or better known as antidepressants, your Prozacs and Zolofts and Lexapros of the world. And another group actually had a combination of SSRIs plus 5 grams of creatine. And they examined the results, monitoring their depression scores. I believe they used a HAM-D or Hamilton D, which is a very common scale that's used to measure, I guess, severity of depression, probably the best way to say it, over the course of a clinical study. And they found that at the 2 month mark, interestingly enough, of course, you'd expect that because both groups were on antidepressants, that there would be some degree of improvement, if you consider antidepressants to be at least somewhat effective in depression. And they both did, but they did see a difference between both groups. And the group that actually was supplementing their antidepressant with 5 grams of creatine actually had, a sizable difference, or a larger raw decrease in severity of their depressive symptoms versus the group that just only took the antidepressant itself, which is very interesting. So, um, and piggybacking off of that, I was scouring the literature a little bit more, and there was actually a more recent study that was done in Europe. I believe it was done in the UK, where there were actually, this one's interesting because, some might argue, well, you have all that background noise where you're adding creatine to a proven commodity, right? A proven chemical like an antidepressant that can help depression already. But interestingly, this other study that was published, I believe, within the past year, was looking at creatine complementing or augmenting cognitive behavioral therapy in the absence of traditional SSRIs or antidepressants. So in this case, they didn't just piggyback and combine it with an existing chemical treatment, they augmented therapy itself. So again, the argument would be, well, you're already using something that is proven to effectively treat depression, and which it is. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a very well established therapy to treat depression, anxiety disorders, etc. Um, Interestingly enough, the group that got CBT alone with a placebo capsule, again, you'd expect some results, and there were benefits from that. But interestingly, the group that got CBT and the actual dosing of creatine, and again, they used about 5 grams per day, found that that group actually had more significant decreases or declines in severity of their depression, which is fascinating. And interestingly, in the first study that I mentioned, the response timeline seemed to be at the 2 week mark. And traditionally with SSRIs, we always kind of quote 6 or 8 weeks, because that's how long most clinical trials are, studied in terms of timeframes for primary endpoints. But interestingly enough, the group that took the creatine supplementation in addition to their SSRI in the first study also seemed to have kind of a accelerated timeline of response. So bottom line, again, is this, hard proof that, this is going to be some kind of effective antidepressant or truly has antidepressant qualities? No, I mean, look, signals are hard to tease apart in clinical trials for depression, and there's a lot of confounders and there's a lot of other factors, small sample size. But interestingly enough, like I said, fascinating that you've now had multiple studies, and there are other smaller ones as well that suggest similar theories that maybe this can be at minimum be used as some kind of augmenting tool agent to traditional treatments or even augmenting therapy itself. So, long-winded answer of the subscriber that sent that question earlier. Is there some potential that creatine could be utilized as some kind of augmenting supplement to be used as a tool against clinical depression? Possibly. I know I hate to be generic, but that's the truth, right? I don't want to oversell it. Very preliminary evidence, but fascinating. I'm always willing to learn. I'm willing to look at literature, willing to have an open mind. Because look, back in the day, who would have thought that now we're utilizing ketamine, now we're on the brink of potentially using psilocybin and potentially down the road MDMA and all these different things, right? So, got to have an open mind when it comes to this kind of stuff. So, bottom line is yes, and theoretically, why? Again, these are the next few comments are super loose theory. I mean, creatine, right? Can modulate adenosine receptors, ADENOSINE, adenosine. And adenosine is a byproduct of ATP, which is used for energy in our cells. So there's some theory that somehow, we are modifying and optimizing energy utilization within neuronal cells or nerve cells. There actually is some theory. It's not even just about the energy, that by modulating these adenosine receptors, you're actually then going to affect things like serotonin and norepinephrine and dopamine. But also, interestingly, it may indirectly affect glutamate, which is something that we've talked about this in previous episodes, how glutamate is now becoming the bigger focus of the area of research in treating clinical depression. So, interesting. I wasn't aware that creatine had some of these potential direct or indirect effects. So something I'm gonna have to read up on more, and it would be fascinating to see if more research will actually happen in the realm of creatine use for neurological conditions, which is there is some research in that area as well as psychiatric conditions. So hopefully that answers in a very lengthy way the question that was asked. So again, somebody asked, if creatine had any potential to be further studied for the use in depression. The answer is yes. And then again, for the person who asked, those are sports trading cards back there. So I see several people have joined as we kind of kick this off. And for those of you who joined in the last few minutes, again, today's episode is a different format. Rather than coming with a preset agenda, we are just doing an open-ended Q&A. It's a Ask the Psychiatrist episode. The only parameters are I can't directly answer questions or provide you with information directly about your customized individual medical care regarding your own diagnoses, specific treatment recommendations. I am not your physician. I am not your doctor. I'm a physician who's here on YouTube for education and entertainment purposes, but I can answer general questions, general concepts. So again, as long as you phrase it in a way where I'm just answering you generally, those are the types of questions I can answer. They could be about medications, diagnosis topics in the realm of mental health, just pop culture, psychology, mental health topics that are in the media, or just random questions, or if you want to just shoot the S with me. So, so I got a question for those of you who are out there. This is more of a casual, lighthearted question, but Super Bowl Sunday's around the corner. And who do you guys got in the Super Bowl? Do you guys have the inevitability of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, or do you have the Philadelphia Eagles winning? So Carrie's a regular listener. Carrie says, here's a question. Have you heard of Gooby and Doobie? He went viral for saying he quit his neurosurgeon job. I think he's very similar to you, early 40s. Oh, yeah. Carrie, I don't watch his channel regularly. I do believe that I've seen some of his videos, more so because I think my wife mentioned how his channel kind of blew up. There was one viral video, I think, where he was kind of giving his testimonial about how he quit being a neurosurgeon, maybe I'm using the wrong words. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but kind of disillusioned by the healthcare system itself and how the hospital system and even the way his own field was set up was to just, it's just kind of to generate money and income for the hospital versus trying to make the most impact in communities and for patients, and seemed somewhat disillusioned. So I do think that's the one you might be mentioning. So yeah, I haven't had a chance to really watch his other stuff, but is that a channel you follow, Carrie? I'm curious, and um, just curious too. Like, what is the focus of Gooby and Dooby's channel? Is it just following life after being a physician, or is it healthcare focused? I'm just curious because, yeah, I think my wife has used to at least watch some of his videos and mentioned it. But yeah, I do believe I saw at least a couple of clips. So yeah, and it doesn't surprise me. To kind of piggyback off your topic, Harry, I think, and I'm not saying this to garner sympathy. I think I think in some respects, not to dog or feel. I mean, it's hard to pull the sympathy card as physicians. Physicians make a good living. Physicians are not in want financially, so don't get it twisted. There's no such thing as a physician who is lacking in terms of income. Look, the average American makes 30 something $1,000 a year. I mean, that's the average, right? And so the average, and my numbers are off here, but I'm saying the average, let's say, primary care physician, the average kind of, psychiatrist, they're making 200 something $1,000 a year. That's average. Then you get into some of these interventional specialties, right? I mean, you're talking 300, 350,000 plus. Okay. So, um, but to my original point, it doesn't surprise me hearing stories like what you're mentioning of Gooby and Dooby, because I do think a lot of physicians end up becoming either burnt out, disillusioned, frustrated, realize that maybe there's too many aspects of their jobs that are not fulfilling, that lead to kind of a, not to sound cliche, almost kind of a mid-career, midlife crisis. I've met people along the way where, if you go through the pathway of becoming a psychiatrist, right, you go through traditional undergrad usually, so 3 or 4 years of that, depending on how fast you finish. Then you do 4 years of med school typically, and then after that you choose your after med school training called residency. Um, Typically you do about a year or so in general medicine, like your primary care medicine, and then you then go into whatever you're specializing in. For example, for me, I did 1 year of like general medicine and neurology, and then 3 more years just all dedicated to psychiatry. Um, and then after that, then you're off into the world finally, being totally independent. I mean, you could pursue extra training, but essentially you are talking about, if you don't cut corners and try to graduate early, as well, I guess cut corners is the wrong word. I mean, you're really talking about a 12-year pathway minimum, right? If you do some surgical fields or other specialized fields, I mean, you're talking about maybe 13, 14 years of training. And, so you're kind of starting your career later in your early 30s, mid 30s, and then you're trying to work your way out of student loans and debt, and you kind of put your head down, work hard, try to make a living, and then once you start hitting that point where you feel more financially free, you've paid off a lot of loans, I think that's the point where a lot of people get, kind of disillusioned. And I've had peers along the way who, and I'm not saying this in a judgmental way, just said during med school, this wasn't for them. After med school, meaning they even achieved and graduated, they got their MD, but during their after med school training to be trained as a physician under the supervision of more senior physicians, and say, this is not for me. I'm so miserable. I'm so unhappy. Being in the hospital 70, 80, 90 hours a week just isn't for me. It's not satisfying. They've quit and changed jobs like partway through. And I've seen it the other way around too. I've seen people who used to be teachers, attorneys, pharmacists who then went back to med school. So it cuts both ways. But there's lots of folks who've stopped. Again, for various reasons, whether it's being burnt out from the hospital churn and burn model, where, I mean, you're asked as physicians if you're a primary care doctor, you're a psychiatrist, you're asked to see 4 or 5 patients an hour. And if you think about that, let's just talk to me specifically as a psychiatrist. Um, if I'm supposed to see 4 or 5 patients an hour in a brick and mortar hospital clinic, what does that really equate to? Let's be blunt. Let's be brutally honest. Okay. That means, right? Let's just say 4 for the sake of simple math, right? I get 15 minutes per patient, okay, for follow up visits. I'm not talking about intakes for their first visit, but I'm saying for your follow up visit, you get 4 patients per hour, 15 minutes apiece. By the time they walk from the waiting room into your office, they sit down, you get a gist of what's going on. You maybe have 8 minutes to talk, okay? Because I need a couple minutes to finish the chart. I need a couple minutes to send the electronic prescription to the pharmacy, close out everything, come up with the plans of when I want to see you next. So we're talking like 8, 9 minutes of actual discussion. And they're out the door, next person comes in, rinse and repeat over and over and over. And you're supposed to see like 30 something patients a day in the clinic, right? God forbid that one of my patients in that model says, I'm in a crisis. I was involved and I was the victim of a sexual assault. I am feeling hopeless and I want to die. And I say, hey, we got about 7, 8 minutes, okay? And then I got the next person in line. It's just, again, that's what I'm talking about. And at some point, that just it just gets out of control. So I could definitely understand, and I know it's not the same thing because he's in neurosurgery, but I could easily see in all different kinds of fields how one could get burnt out. And that's not unique to the field of medicine. People get burnt out in all different walks of life, right? But yeah, I'll have to take a look. And Carrie, and then we'll get on to Dennis. Dennis, what's up? I'll read your question in just 30 seconds here. Carrie also follows up and says, started watching his videos, haven't seen all of them, but he talks about dealing with trauma and talking about CBD gummies and mushroom gummies. Also talks a lot about advocating a plant-based diet. Okay, interesting. I mean, yeah, CBD gummies. I mean, obviously, I'm familiar with that and just THC in general. Mushroom gummies. I mean, I'll be blunt, Carrie. That just sounds gross. I mean, have you ever tried a mushroom gummy out of curiosity? I mean, I'm assuming they'd have to put some kind of flavors and sugar additives or something because I mean, just on face value, maybe I'm being obtuse here, but a mushroom gummy just kind of sounds kind of gross, maybe. Or maybe it's flavorful. I don't know. Maybe it's I'm obtuse. I've never had a mushroom gummy. I mean, I've had THC, gummies, THC edibles, etc. But yeah, I've never had a mushroom gummy. I'm wondering how that would taste. I think just like on face value, that just kind of sounds. I'm a little averse to kind of imagining how that would taste. And plant-based diets, yeah, I'm. God, talking about diets, Carrie. I don't know. I got to figure something out. I am the king, Carrie. I am the king of yo-yo diets. Right. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I can't do the slow and steady. And I know you shouldn't use the word diet, right? I'm a psychiatrist. I'm in mental. I get it. It's healthy, sustainable life choices, right? And I know the mental health field is very averse to the word diet. I just can't help myself. Carrie says he made a video tripping on them. Okay, now I gotta go look this up. So I will go look this up. When I have some free time this week, Carrie, I will do that for you so that we can chat about it later in a future episode. So he made a video tripping on them. Okay, I'll have to check that out. That's funny. So back to the topic of dieting. I know we're only at February, right? And I'm already like, man, my motivation got so low. I was talking earlier in one of my live streams about, trying to exercise. I got off to a good start for the year and I'm already fizzling out, right? So it's February. I don't want to be in an all or nothing mentality. I don't want to say, oh, it's already gone. Screw the next 11 months, right? So I got to figure something out. So you got any suggestions, Carrie, I don't even care. I'm going to say it flat out. I don't even care if it's like a fad diet, if it's a yo-yo thing. I know I don't practice what I preach, but sometimes I just need to gamify stuff and have concrete parameters sometimes to just get myself going. But I got to do something. Speaking of diet, so Dennis, to your question, Dennis is a regular subscriber here. So Dennis, we were doing Q&A open session, so you can even throw more questions after this one. Dennis says, can psychiatrists use dream analysis as part of their diagnostic or therapeutic armamentarium? Oh, the answer is yes. I would say yes. I'm going to say my answer and my commentary, you got to take it with a grain of salt. I am probably, if there was a spectrum of psychiatrists, right? And let's say on this spectrum were the pure Freudians, right? Freudians and the Carl Jungians, okay, who are very into psychoanalysis. And I have plenty of colleagues. That is all they do. Like they run cash only practices. They ask you to come as a patient where they're primarily doing therapy as a psychiatrist, kind of like the old school methodology before managed care came in and they carved us out to be pill pushers, right? Back when psychiatrists were doing everything, they were your therapist slash med manager and primarily doing therapy more than anything, right? I mean, this is back in the day, right? So, but I have colleagues, this is all they do, right? So they're very into psychoanalysis and they're seeing their patients, at least in the beginning of treatment, like 3 times a week. And that's kind of like, that's not abnormal in traditional psychoanalytic, frameworks. They see like 2-3 times a week, really get into it, really get in depth with you, getting to understand you, your conscious, subconscious, unconscious, etc. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they do. And they're on this end of the spectrum. Then you have like the pure, I would say, I don't know if there's such a thing, but like pure, like almost like biological, structural, like we're just looking for organic disease pathology states of the brain, right? I mean, like pure, you know, biologically based, I guess, psychiatrists, right? And all they want to talk about are receptors and mechanisms and this and that. So I would say I'm somewhere in the middle, maybe leaning a little more towards the biological, but I'm right there in the middle. But to answer your question, yeah, some of my colleagues that are on that end of the spectrum, they do this. And again, I think it's up for debate, right? How sound in science is it to be sitting there doing, dream interpretation? This is my general take on it, right? I don't know that you want to base your entire, premise of treatment off of things that you're interpreting from dreams, but I just view, interpreting the significance of dreams. I wouldn't go so in depth about trying to connect the content as being some kind of absolute truth. I think it's more interesting as a way to, you can use dreams as like a window into somebody's subconscious, unconscious, or their soul. And what I mean by that is what's going to be more interesting to me is not necessarily the minutia of every single piece of content in the dream itself. I mean, there may be some symbolism and things that are in there that are worth exploring. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But it's really more, what is the patient's own emotional reaction, psychological reaction, their interpretations, and their, I guess, the residual effects that the dreams themselves had on the patient, right? Because that is what's happening, right? I mean, that is in the present. That is their emotional state, their psychological state. These are their thoughts. These are their emotions that are happening in the moment in real life, right? And so that's worth examining for sure, right? And why? What makes them have this kind of reaction? And it gives you insight into them by understanding what makes them tick, why they react a certain way. Maybe this is a reminder of something that actually happened in their life. It resonates with them in some way. So that's the part to me that's worth exploring, right? And look, trust me, like I as part of my training, I still had to go through some degree of psychoanalytical training. And trust me, and don't get me wrong, I'm not painting my psychoanalytical colleagues as like, oh, like they take something literally in a dream. That's not what I'm saying. But like, I mean, you could really, really go down the rabbit hole, right? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying like you can really analyze the hell out of dreams. I can still vividly remember, when one of my mentors was breaking down a session with a patient in front of a small group of us as residents. I would say, the patient had a dream about their deceased mother who was in the driveway in the dream and was wearing a red coat. And then, they connected it to, when the mother left and abandoned the family at one point and drove away in a red car. And why was red coming up as a theme? And, so is this, subconscious, unconscious, latent trauma that now needs to be explored, and focusing on the residual pain and healing from this trauma. So on and on. We spent like an hour, like analyzing this to then figure out like what tidbits to then have brought back into a session to then discuss for further exploration with the patient, right? So you can really go wild with this kind of stuff. So yes, they can use dream analysis as a part of their kind of like therapeutic mechanism or tool. Okay. So that's not uncommon. That's not uncommon. Um, you know, and again, there's a time and a place for that, right? So I don't want to be dogmatic, right? Um, but I would say in this day and age, it's not often that I say to someone, I want you to go specifically do psychoanalytical therapy with a patient. I think there is a time and a place for that, but I would say in any given year, I could probably count on one hand how often I recommend that. I typically tend to lean on, yeah, I know it's kind of boring, cut and dry stuff like, cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure response prevention therapy, interpersonal psychotherapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, uh, things that just have more concrete targets, right? They tend to be focusing on behavioral change and behavioral modification. And maybe it's just me and my own bias, right? I just like to have these like concrete landmarks, right? To have a patient to also be able to tell me themselves, like they can feel it, they can quantify and measure, like I'm making progress. And again, of course, even that is somewhat subjective, right? I subjectively feel I'm not as distressed. I subjectively feel I'm not as melancholic or as panicked or as anxious or as overwhelmed. These are all vague words, right? But I do think it's easier to kind of measure, right, some of these like behavioral outcomes and changes in some of these more, I guess, for lack of a better term, more like concrete behavioral modification, behavioral reconditioning, psychological reconditioning type of therapies, right? So, and they're just more easily, I guess, replicated. They're more easily kind of plug and play as long as you do it within a certain framework. You could literally probably plug in any therapist to some degree, right? Who's good at least. I guess I'll preface it with that. And you should still find um, that it would work, right? Where with psychoanalysis, it's very like clinician dependent. There's so much, I guess, how do I put it? Like almost like user variability, right? And it's hard to study this on a large scale, right? That's why you're not going to find, right, these enormous, like large scale, long term controlled trials using psychoanalysis, right? Because it's so hard to replicate that unique dyad between patient and psychiatrist, which would look so different with psychiatrist A and patient A and psychiatrist B and patient A, right? I mean, it could be totally radically different. Where if I said psychiatrist A and B, both of you do CBT with patient A, again, some minutia might be different, but what you're doing from a big picture framework, it's going to look very similar, right? And that's what I mean by that term plug and play, right? Like, I mean, you can, it's more manualized, systematically being able to be replicated, studied, etc. So again, not saying that it doesn't have a role. It's just hard to study. Okay. And again, I know that psychoanalytic colleagues of mine will vehemently agree with me. I didn't say useless, better, worse. I just said hard to study. That's just a fact. If you can't agree with that, then you just don't understand research. So it would be hard to study that in a very kind of systematic fashion, in my opinion. So, and that's why like people have brought up like, is it worth doing like 10 years and 5 years of psychoanalysis? And again, to each their own. I think some people are going to find it beneficial. I really think, honestly, more than anything, and this is what I mean, but I'm not dogmatic about it. And I know we've gone on a tangent here, but it's like one of the biggest factors and predictors of good outcomes in therapy is trust. I know that sounds so cliche, but I mean, think about that, right? Like sometimes with you and a therapist, you are being more vulnerable with them than you are with a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a family member, a parent, children, friends, your boss, whatever. You are telling them about like your deepest, darkest secrets. You're saying, yeah, you know what? I'm really upset at my partner. I want to leave my husband, my wife. I can't stand them. Sometimes I want to kill them. I mean, you're saying all these things, right? I mean, so if you don't trust your therapist and you can't be at that level of vulnerability, it's tough, right? So numerous times they've studied this. I don't know why they keep wasting money studying it over and over and over again to come to the same conclusion. Is that trust is actually one of the biggest factors in a therapy relationship, right? It was more important than what college they, graduated from, psychology program they graduated from, whether they were a PhD versus a PsyD versus a licensed clinical social worker versus a licensed counselor. It came down to trust, and that concept has been replicated repeatedly in studies. So that's crucial. So, I always tell my patients, when I refer them to therapy, during our medication management visits, I'll say, well, how are things going in therapy? And, look, with 14 years of practice, I mean, I've become okay at reading body language and tone of voice. And if I get that hesitation, or maybe I think they're saying what they think I want to hear, I'll stop them and say, hey, it's okay. It's like, look, I'm not besties with whatever therapy. I might not even know your therapist more than likely. So what was that hesitation? What's going on? I just want to know. Because look, my response to patients are, if you don't have a great alliance and if you don't have a great rapport, I say, just go find another one. Not to sound brutally harsh, the same applies to me, right? It's like in the field of psychiatry, there are good-hearted, good human psychiatrists, and then there are crappy ones. The burnout docs, the ones that just don't care, they're mentally checked out. Just like in any field, right? You got a whole spectrum. You got great ones, good ones, crap, right? Same thing in therapy. I tell them, look, you don't trust them if you don't have a good rapport, if it's not effective, you're not making progress. I said, be fair. You should have that conversation. Now, that's hard. A lot of patients of mine don't want to have that conversation and say, hey, I don't think this is working for me. To have that blunt conversation to analyze, well, is it the dynamic? Is it something I'm misunderstanding? Is it something that you're not listening to me about? Um, you know, a lot of people don't want to have that conversation, but I say, look, whether you do or you don't, I advocate that you should, but if you don't, then I guess you do got to look for someone else. If you're not even comfortable enough to have that conversation, that in itself is telling, right? Because a mature therapist, if you got that feedback, something isn't working, I don't feel like our rapport is great, I don't feel like I'm making progress, they'll say, okay, tell me more. I want to hear more about this. What if it's concerning you, it's important, let's talk about it. Versus getting defensive or what do you mean? I'm doing my job, right? If you got that kind of response, that's actually a red flag. Then you probably do want to switch therapists at a certain point if you guys can't get past that. And then look, therapists are human too, right? So, but if you can't have that conversation and you can't work through that, then that in itself is probably going to be big enough of an impasse that it's worth investing your time and energy elsewhere. Your time is your most precious commodity. And you want to, when you're investing it in yourself, you want to invest it in someone else who's going to work with you, who really has your best interest at heart. And it's got to be that fine balance of like knowing how to support you, but knowing how to push you and push you just enough outside your comfort zone that it's probably going to raise discomfort and tension, but not overwhelm you. And that's a hard balance to find. So, anyways, we went on random topics there, but Dennis, thank you for the comment. For those of you who just joined us, a couple new viewers, today is just Q&A day. So it's a Ask a Psychiatrist day. I saw someone else just join right now. So just Ask a Psychiatrist episode. Free reign, ask whatever you want. Ask about, I guess you can ask stuff about my personal life, this or that, random questions, topics in the news, whatever you want. So keep those questions coming in. So Carrie, to one of your comments, back to the mushrooms. So Amanita muscaria, I might be butchering that, psychoactive compound different than psilocybin. So Carrie, look, I'm never going to try to pretend like I know everything. So what is, you summarize for me versus me typing into like Chat GPT or something. What is the differentiation, or what is the difference between the properties of Amanita muscaria versus kind of the more better known, widely known psilocybin? Like what makes them somewhat different, or what are the different features, I guess, that makes it unique from psilocybin, or are they very similar? I'm just curious because again, I'm not as familiar with that particular component or that particular subtype of what's in shrooms, certain shrooms. So, anyways, so while we're waiting for more questions, we see a couple more viewers. Good. So for those of you who just joined, today is a Ask a Psychiatrist open Q&A. So if you got a question that you want me to address and read out loud, please type it up in the chat. If you feel more comfortable texting it, you can text it to the number on your screen. Again, the only thing I'm not going to be able to answer directly is if you're asking direct questions about your specific medical conditions, doses, etc. So Carrie says, I actually don't know just what Gooby was talking about. Best guess is maybe it's better preserved in gummy form for psychoactive use. Gotcha. Well, since we're on the topic of gummies, right? For you, Carrie, Dennis, for you guys out there, are you guys in states where marijuana is legal? Where you guys have dispensaries for recreational use? Or are you guys in locations where it's still medicinal only, or none of the above? No medicinal, no recreational. So, because yeah, I mean, here in Illinois, I mean, God, I mean, it's just ballooned. It's like these dispensaries are everywhere. So, I haven't been to one in a long time. Like there's these mega chains now. Like they're, I think they're national chains. I don't think it's just regional, but there's one called Sunnyside and another one called Hatch. Those are pretty popular around here. So it's been a while since I've gone to them, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, edibles, I think I just don't do edibles correct. It's just like, I think if, it's, the few times I've tried them, it's just I probably do too much, and then they hit me all of a sudden and sneak up on me. So just not my thing. Never been something I've been, too keen on. And I think if I were to do a ride, smoking is probably preferable in my opinion, personally. But yeah, God, these dispensaries all over the place. I feel like it's only a matter of time. Once psilocybin and some of these, compounds and shrooms maybe end up getting approved for any kind of use, whether it's psychiatric, neurological, something, I have to imagine it's only a matter of time before we even see different types of psilocybin dispensaries, whether it's psilocybin or some kind of loophole, kind of like we have these like Delta variants of THC and CBD and all this stuff. But you're going to, there probably are already, is my assumption, for at least like the loophole variations of these things. But at some point, I feel like it's going to be on a massive level, kind of like what these THC dispensaries are at this point. So, but anyways, all right, keep those questions coming in, guys. I mean, even if you've already asked some, you could send multiple questions, keep them coming. So what do you guys think? There's I don't even have an opinion. I'm literally asking you guys, like, all this chaos that's happening in DC right now. And then the reason I ask is because, getting lots of colleagues and lots of peers and a lot of people, talking about concerns about funding drying up, funds being tied up, whether it's through the NIH itself, or, other healthcare related, departments. There's even rumblings on the state level that, funding for different Department of Mental Health Services may be going to be drastically cut, or like the Department of Mental Health Services in certain states are going to be swept and combined into like the corrections budget. So, it's just kind of chaos happening, right? So Carrie says, okay, I'll have to look that up. That's the title. The title is, quote, "Loser Neurosurgeon Wastes His Skills High on Mushroom Gummies Laying on a Couch. Why Won't He Change?" maybe you could react to it for a few minutes. Yeah, I'll take a look. I wonder if that's his video or is that a reaction video titled that way? It almost sounds more like a reaction video title, but no, I'll have to take a look. So Gooby, yeah, I'll make sure to bookmark this. I'll take a look. So, but yeah, there's just chaos on in Washington D.C. Right? You have Doge, DOGE, right? That initiative led by Elon Musk, kind of going all over the place, making suggestions on, what should be cut, what shouldn't be, what's wasteful. Um, you know, I don't even know. I don't fully understand, right? I mean, is this just some kind of consulting group? They're just making suggestions and then it's up to Trump to actually do something about it or Congress to do something about it. So that part is not even clear to me, right? But it sounds like just even shedding light on what they're kind of deeming as wasteful, right, is causing chaos right now, right? And it's kind of having a trickle effect and it's even making rumblings on the state level. So, obviously, lots still up in the air. It sounds like there's a lot of chaos happening on that front, but yeah, I mean, it just seems like we'll see. I think 2025, we're only 1 month deep, right? And we're only a couple weeks into the Trump presidency, but looks like things are being shaken up on the DC level, whether it's just saber rattling for the sake of appeasing a base, um, or if this is signs of actual changes happening. We'll see what happens. So Carrie has another question. Says, do you ever screen for serious abnormalities like amyloid plaques in cases of severe depression? Simple answer is no. We usually don't do that. It's just not a common standard of care kind of thing. I would say even if you were to scale that back, right, Carrie? So even something more on a more routine basis, I think there's kind of this. How do I put it? There's almost this hope, right? There's almost this like hope that we can identify this like concrete reversible cause to biologically reverse depression from a medical standpoint, right? And don't get me wrong, I mean, there are clearly medical conditions that can induce or contribute to depression. So that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, let's say it's kind of a typical outpatient case where someone comes to my clinic or sees me and says, hey, I've been struggling with depression for X amount of months or years. I've tried a couple different antidepressants. Like, I'm convinced that, no one's thoroughly screened me for other medical causes. And I would say what is considered like standard, right? Like a standard workup that is not, it's the balance of like not being extreme and not overburdening the patient with exhaustive tests that are going to be wasteful, low probability, versus just also not ignoring some probably easily treatable, but I'm not going to lie, my next comment is easily treatable, but honestly low incidence, low true positive rate of discovery type of things, right? But it's very reasonable. And I would say the typical workup as like a preliminary, like biological workup would encompass a lot of things that you'd expect to hear your primary care doctor doing, right? So I'm not saying anything revolutionary. You'd screen for things like checking your complete blood count to see, is anemia playing a role, right? And is there a component of anemia with iron deficiency or B12 deficiency? You would be checking for, and again, very low, I would say very low rate of discovering this is the actual root cause. But we do it anyway. I think it's really more for psychological comfort to the patient that we've at least checked it, but also probably honestly, like I think psychiatrists sometimes feel like they need to do something, but I will tell you the actual, positive rate of discovery that like you discovered a thyroid problem being the root cause, 100% causality of one's depression is very low. I mean, it is a minuscule percentage, but we do typically check a thyroid stimulating hormone or a TSH to see is there some thyroid abnormality. And I mean, it would have to be phenomenally low. Like you'd have to have a super low, not just marginally borderline. I mean, it'd have to be very low to really be kind of the root cause of depression, which it rarely ever is. I'm just going to flat out say. People might disagree. I'm just saying Look up the stats, look up the percentage rates. It is rare that that's the cause, but we routinely screen for that. So thyroid abnormalities, um, like I said, looking at your complete blood count for anemia. I don't think it's absurd to check vitamin D levels to see if there's a vitamin D deficiency. Um, I don't think, depending on the number of risk factors and sleep patterns and energy levels, is sleep apnea a causality? I would say that one's probably something that is underappreciated at how much sleep apnea can be a factor, like organically speaking, of a contributor to depression. Because imagine you're literally not getting oxygen at night to the point that you're waking up sometimes numerous times per night, numerous times per hour, gasping for air. Just think about that, right? Without hyperbole, that's what sleep apnea is about. What do you think is going to happen the following day? Are you going to feel energized and refreshed? Are you going to be cognitively sharp? Processing speed? What do you think that's going to do to your mood and your irritability, right? So sleep apnea is definitely one that's reasonable to look into. I don't think it's very common that we would recommend even a CT scan, MRI. I would say that would really be an outlier circumstance. It wouldn't be a routine part of the workup. Maybe once you start getting into the, hey, my depression hasn't resolved for, a couple years now, continuously, right? I've tried numerous therapies and antidepressants and it's not lifting. Then we start getting into the more like outlier investigations. Megan, welcome to the live stream. So today's episode is, thanks for saying hello. It's just basically we're doing a different format today rather than a set agenda. This is just open Q&A. So you can just fire whatever questions you want to ask. I just can't answer about direct medical advice directly for you, but general questions about any topic, about psychiatry, medication concepts, diagnostic concepts, pop culture. So feel free to throw in, and there's no limit. We only have a handful of viewers, so you can ask however many questions you want. But Carrie, back to your question. Yeah, we don't typically screen for amyloid plaques. And beyond what I kind of mentioned there, like checking for vitamin D deficiency, anemias of iron deficiency, B12, thyroid abnormalities, there's not a ton we do up front minus that. So those are kind of the preliminary kind of like biological screeners that we do. Okay, so yeah, not very common that we look for that other stuff. So, and then one thing you can do, and again, keyword is can, right? I think these companies oversell it. I'm going to say it. They oversell it because when there's money to be made, right, they just make it. Some people will order, whether it's your psychiatrist or family medicine doc, they'll order something called like gene site testing. That's one of the, there's numerous companies that do this, but basically it's genetic testing to basically give you a pretty elaborate printout of the profile of your liver enzymes. That's the most accurate way to say it. So, to be fair, right, there are a couple of genetic markers where these companies can also say, hey, if you happen to have this marker, you might be someone who might have a better response to this antipsychotic or this antidepressant. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be able to guarantee like these are the meds that will work for you. These are the meds that won't, right? Megan says, if I could redo my life, I want to study psychiatry. I'm glad. Well, thanks for being here, Megan. What do you do for a living? What do you do for work, Megan? D77, thank you for joining. D77 says, glad you're live tonight, having a lot of anxiety. Hey, D77, what? I don't want you to overshare if you don't want to feel. What's got you anxious? What's getting you worried tonight? I'm glad you're here, whether you're anxious or not. But what's on your mind? What's got you stressed out, D77? So, and Megan, what do you do for a living? So back to what I was saying. So if you ever get like this genetic profiling of your liver enzymes, I just want to warn everybody. I'm not saying don't go do it. If your insurance covers it and you're going to have a minimal copay and you're not going to pay a lot of money out of your own pocket, well, then go get it. Who cares, right? I don't have anything against you getting it. But if someone ever tries to sell you on, hey, like you looked into your insurance and you're going to have to fork over $500, $300 of your own responsibility, I don't know that you need to do that, okay? Because what you will get printed out, it's going to say these 20 something, 30 something subtypes of your liver enzymes. It'll say you're either an average metabolizer, and what that translates to, it's going to say use psychiatric meds as you normally would. If you're in the like 5 to 10% who are ultra rapid metabolizers, it might say, hey, be careful. Like you might be digesting these meds faster than you would actually think. You might actually need a higher dose than the average person. You might, keywords might, or the opposite, right? You might be in the fractional amount of people where you digest it super slowly, and be careful. Maybe because of that, the levels are higher than you'd expect. That's why you're so sensitive to certain side effects. Maybe you need to be more cautious and have your psychiatrist dose it more carefully than usual, right? I will say, right, in 14 years, I've probably had one instance where I was just like, wow, this actually changed our treatment plan. And here's what I mean. I had one guy who we tried so many different things, and then we ended up trying the genetic profiling testing, and it showed that they were in like the 2 to 5% of people who were like what are called like ultra rapid metabolizers at a particular enzyme. And basically, because of that, the levels in his blood were almost non-detectable. And to prove it, there's not many antidepressants out there that have like easily ordered blood levels. So, and there's not a ton of utility in doing that, honestly, because blood levels don't always correlate with therapeutic effect. But there are a few. One of them is called nortriptyline, and the other one is called amitriptyline. But nortriptyline is the most common one that has blood levels that we do feel somewhat correlate to like a therapeutic blood level that we should target to try to get a good effect. And so we tested the theory, and I got him to a dose that I would have expected to him be at a solid range. And I trusted this person that he was being compliant. His family members were saying he's being compliant. We got the blood levels back, and lo and behold, it did match up that genetic profiling. And basically, the blood level said he's basically not taking it, and it's like non-existent. And it actually matched up. So that was the one time in 14 years where I'm like, man, it really altered our treatment plan. And then we had to use something that didn't go through that particular enzyme and was digested by other enzymes, and we did get better results. Okay, and we did get better results. So, but short of that, oftentimes you get these gray area results where it's like, use with caution, use as usual. Well, they might be a slow metabolizer, but they might be a little bit rapid metabolizer, but not necessarily giving you anything definitive. And then you're just kind of like, great, I got this fancy 25-page chart that says, do your best and hope for the best, right? So again, I'm not trying to sound horrible here, but I just don't want anyone to ever oversell what you would get as a result of these, right? I think some people get very wedded to graphs and charts and pictures, and they're like, this will unlock the answer, right? And that's what these companies bank on, right? They want to bank on like, you got this tangible analysis. Now we've unlocked, the secret for what your psychiatrist should do. And that's where the oversell is. So we'll go back to some of the comments here. D77 says, I found your channel looking up addiction videos. I keep relapsing, trying to get off Suboxone. Man, I'm sorry to hear that, D77. Look, all I can say, D77, is, number one, the fact that you're here randomly on a Tuesday night trying to listen tells me there's a part of you inside of you, not to sound cliche, D77, I don't know if you're a he or a she, but like part of you is motivated still. You're motivated even in the midst of frustration, even in the midst of relapsing on them, because you're here, right? You're here trying to figure out more information. You're here to try to figure out what to do next. So the motivation piece, right? Whatever you can do to stay focused on your motivation, that's the key, right? What you don't want to do, D77, is you don't want to allow frustration to convince you that you are powerless, that the effort is pointless, that there isn't enough reason to push forward. Okay? 'Cause even though I don't know you, I don't know you. I don't know you. You don't know me. What I do know is you are worth putting in the effort for. Okay. And just human to human, you are worth it, right? I mean, doesn't matter. I don't even know how old you are. You could be 25, you could be 50. All I know is that if you're alive and you're here and you're talking, it means that you have potential ahead of you, right? You have potential ahead of you of unlocked potential of things you can do in life, meaningful things that you can do for yourself, for people in your circles, for your friends, for your family, for strangers. Meaning, I just know you are worth staying motivated, right? So, and it's not even just about that. I mean, what can we do? I mean, look, I know I'm not your physician, but look, I don't know your situation. I don't know what kind of coverage you have. I don't know what access to care or lack of access to care you have, but right? I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do. Maybe you've tried some of these. I'm not saying anything revolutionary, right? Some people, Suboxone works, right? Some people need to go the route of, maybe using methadone, right? Some people maybe just being on opioids or partial opioids don't work. They need something called Vivitrol, right? It's like an opioid receptor blocker. And some people need to be on the Vivitrol shot where they can just guarantee it's in their system and they can't skip it. And that's what's going to help them, right? Some people don't need any of the above. They need to maybe use as a catalyst, right? Going to some kind of residential program, right? Maybe you need support groups, maybe whatever it may be, right? All I know is, right, I'm not dogmatic about how you get, like how you do it. I'm just saying you got to keep fighting and scratching. And if one thing doesn't work, try the other thing. If this thing doesn't work, try both at the same time. I mean, it's frustrating. It is tiring. It is exhausting, no doubt. All I'm saying is you're worth pushing forward, and whatever you can do to kind of just stay focused on those motivating factors, right? And try your best. And you might already be doing this. I'm not lecturing you. I'm just saying this more as encouraging words, right? D77, it's just I don't want you to get into a point of like being very binary, right? I slipped up, I used, screw it, I failed. No. You can't discount all the other times that you were clean and sober, right? What I find when I've worked with my patients over the years who are struggling with substance use, right? It's very easy to totally ignore, like, hey, I had 90 out of 91 days clean and not using. And then you have that one day and you say, oh, F it. I screwed up. It's all done. And I'm like, 90 out of 91 days was awesome. When we look back in a different chapter of your life, it might have been the inverse and you were using 90 out of 91 and maybe you had one day clean, right? I mean, and that's not just like mental gymnastics. That's reality, right? Like the fact is you're saying your sentence was, I keep relapsing, trying to get off. So keywords are, you are fighting, right? A part of you is dying to be healthier, right? So that's the takeaway. That's the key. So how do you find help to keep that side of your ambivalence strong, right? And I use that word, right? Because we all have our demons. Doesn't matter, whether it's opioids, it's porn, it's gambling, it's this or that, it's toxic relationships. All of us internally, myself included, we have ambivalence every day. The unhealthy part of me pulling at me saying, F it, let's just do all the hedonistic things. Let's just do the path of least resistance. No, we're going to put in the effort and the pain and the annoyance and the nuisance, and we're going to do healthy stuff, right? That's every day. That's what we're doing. All of us. Anyone who can't relate to that, I don't know. Denial, probably. We're all fighting with ambivalence every day. So D77. So Megan, thank you, Megan, for showing your kind words, saying keep fighting the good fight. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad that chapter, you've moved on from. Thank you for sharing that, Megan. I appreciate it. So Megan also says, stay-at-home mom. Oldest is 21, youngest is 9. So essentially, Megan, right? I mean, that is an important job, right? And you have had direct influence on your kids, right? So time to get a job. So you looking for a job now, Megan? And if so, is that something that creates anxiety, like about looking at the workplace, or is that something you're still contemplating, whether to jump back in and have some structure and routine with a job? D77 says, thank you, Andrew. I'm like, no, thank you. Thank you, D77. I mean, and if you haven't had, again, like it sounds like you're familiar, because if you're on and off Suboxone, that means you're engaged in some form of treatment. But talk to your provider, go on the SAMHSA website, okay? If you've already checked out the SAMHSA website, look at your local NAMI group, NAMI, to see, is there any other kind of resources that could be offered? Support groups, telehealth, advocacy groups that offer some low cost or free interventions, whatever you got to do. I mean, again, trial and error, test different things. You are worth doing trial and error. So, if it was simple, we would have solved this for this whole country by now, D77, right? This is, this is tough. It's tough. So Megan says, no, I'd love to, but I'm still trying to figure out how to parent correctly. Well, Megan, I mean, look, I'm not to sound cliche. I think really what's most important, it's not about a binary parenting correctly, incorrectly. No one's got it down. I mean, I got a 9-year-old, so I got a 9-year-old. So I don't got a 21-year-old. I got a 9-year-old. We got one, and we're not planning on having any others right now. But God, I fumble so much too, right? So it's more about growth mindset, right? So it's really, how do you have a growth mindset and just be willing to learn and adapt, right? And Megan, what I found, and I don't know if this is true of you or not, I'm just saying in general, right? Being present, being available, just your children knowing that you are available to them. I'm not saying they have to be dependent on you or they have to be talking to you nonstop. It's the psychological concept of they know, if needed, consistently speaking, you are available to them. And if they needed you and they needed your support, you would be available to them. And if you feel like you've fostered that over the course of the 21-year-old's lifetime, and if you foster that in your young one's life right now, to me, everything else is window dressing. And I'm being serious. Like, studies have shown that too. And forget studies. I think from my life experience, studies, that's what we know is true, is that is what is crucial, is the psychological constancy. And if you have fostered a dynamic with you and your kids, or at least fostering a dynamic with your kids right now, that at least they know abstractly you are available to them. And that is a consistent feeling that you are available to them. That's, to me, then you're doing a wonderful job, right? Everything else is just a cherry on top and window dressing. So keep that concept in mind. And trust me, I didn't maybe say it as eloquently as I could, but if you go look that up in literature, in anthropology, sociology, psychology journals, that's what you're going to find. That is the linchpin of what is a crucial factor in quote unquote parenting, right? I mean, again, there's no such thing as right or wrong. I think it's really about growth mindset, being willing to learn, being humble enough to say, I've got to learn more, adapt, be flexible, but also just being consistent for them. So that's all I got. I'm not I'm the furthest thing from, someone who's parenting correctly as well. So you could throw me in the boat with you, but that's the only pearls of wisdom I have. So Yeah, D77. So yeah, insurance helps a lot. Like, don't get me wrong, right? I mean, having insurance opens up so many possibilities. But yeah, sublocade. Yeah, that's not that's not a bad idea. And I think it's worth talking to your clinician. Like I said, you do some trial and error. If you try that out and maybe it's better than what you've been doing, great. If it doesn't, you know what? You've explored it at the very least, right? And you don't have that wondering and what if. Like, you've tried it. Maybe then you cross it off your list and you move on, right? So, but yeah, man. What if there's other questions you got, D77, throw them out while we're here on the live stream. We'll keep going for maybe another 5-10 minutes here since we got some more people joining. For those of you who just joined, we got several more people who just joined. This is you're at the tail end of Ask a Psychiatrist episode of our live stream. So there's no structured format. Just throw out your questions. Could be anything. Just throw out questions about mental health, med topics, research topics, pop culture, anything you want. Random questions about me, whatever. So we still got I'll stick around for 10 more minutes since we had a few more people join. So Megan says, something I've learned very recently. I'm so lost in my own head 90% of the time. Being more aware of being present is making such a difference with my younger two. Tying Megan's comment and Carrie's comment. Carrie says, do you think mindfulness can cause physical changes in the brain? I think so. And I'm not saying that to just be cliche, right? So Megan and Carrie have similar types of comments and questions. So Megan is talking about the benefits of just being more aware and being present. And question from Carrie earlier is, do you think mindfulness can cause physical changes in the brain? I actually do, because I do think being mindful in itself can have downstream effects on your physiology. Okay. And I'm not saying, and I think here's the thing, right? There is this misconception, like mindfulness means I'm going to be like in some kind of Zen Buddhist state. No, that's not what mindfulness is about. Mindfulness is literally what Megan is saying, right? Just being present. Like, I'm being present and I'm aware and I'm being grounded, right? I'm not distracted by 8,000 thoughts and 8,000 distractions, right? Think about this, right? How many of you today, this is relatable, how many of you today mindlessly ate something? Whether it was your breakfast, whether it was you downing some energy drink like me to just caffeinate yourself, whether you were like me and you ran over and you stuffed your face when you had a few minutes instead of eating a proper lunch, right? How many of you mindlessly ate something today? Like, you didn't even give a damn thought to the texture, to the taste, whether you enjoyed it or not, right? And you just shoved a beverage in your mouth. Think about that and multiply it 100-fold. How many of you did some mindless driving today? How many of you did some mindless listening? You weren't even really listening and present for your partner, for your child, for at some point today, my kid was talking to me. I was tuning in and out. I was trying to be engaged. And then my mind was thinking about 18 other things, what I got to prep for work tomorrow, what I got to prep for this live stream, So being mindless, right? It has its consequences. Mindlessness lends itself to allowing anxiety to sneak up on you. Mindlessness lends itself for you to getting overwhelmed. Mindlessness lends itself to distractibility and confusion, and those all of the above have behavioral consequences, right? So I'm not saying that we have some kind of concrete proof that being mindful versus mindless has some direct biological correlate that happens immediately in your body. But to Carrie's question, I think if we practice mindfulness, right, it lends itself for us to be able to better manage and attenuate our emotions and anxiety and stress, right? And if we could do those things, then again, downstream indirectly, I do think that affects heart rate, breathing rate, are gastrointestinal symptoms. Because I'm not like, I am a true believer. I do believe there is a mind body, mind gut connection, right? I don't think it's a mystery. For those of you who've never been anxious, man, God bless you. But for those of you who are like everyone and like me, like, I'm sure you can relate when you have had a moment in your life when you were panic ridden, anxious, nervous, and on edge, and you got the bubble guts, right? Stomach cramps, stomach churning, diarrhea, more bowel movements than usual. There is a direct physical connection between mind and gut, right? I know a lot of people harp on like the vagus nerve that travels, from here to here. And there's truth to that, right? So there is truly, it's not even a cliche statement. There is literally a cognitive gut connection, right? That is like a concrete example, right, of mindset and physiology. How many of you had heartburn when you were stressed out? And you might not even have an actual diagnosis of gastroesophageal reflux disease, right? You don't even have GERD, right? And how you are doing mentally and emotionally literally now is causing you acid reflux. Like I said, stomach problems, diarrhea, etc. So, long-winded way of saying, Carrie, yeah, I do believe that mindfulness has some effects, whether you want to say direct, indirect, on physiology that can affect your body. So I do believe that there is a connection. So got some back and forth here, and I appreciate the engagement. So Megan says, mother, stepfather, little brother, cousin, all seem to have issues before. Opioids clean now, thank God. Yeah, thank God. Amen to that. Amen to that, Megan. I'm glad to hear that for not just you, but your whole family. So, D77, I made an appointment, but I didn't go. Have so much anxiety talking to doctors and a fear I won't be able to get the shot. Yeah, D77. I look, I hope I hope that you can work through that anxiety. And I would say, what is the anxiety about? Is it the anxiety about, you know, them not agreeing with you? Is it anxiety about, uh, them not wanting to even spend the time talking about other options? Just worried about perceived judgment about your struggles and them being judgmental about it. So I think part of it is just working through what is the anxiety about so you have a better grasp on it. And then to be more concrete, God, I would hope that you have clinicians who aren't going to be doing those things, right? Because my mentality would be, what do we got to do? Let's do what we got to do to help you, right? And let's go over all the options. Let's weigh the pros and cons, and let's make a reasonable decision, right? So yeah, I encourage you. I mean, sit there, maybe even think through what the anxiety itself is about, before even going in the next time. But whatever you can do just to get yourself in there, that's half the battle, right? And then hopefully you can have that discussion. So I got a text coming through. Someone has texted through a text line, said, so if this person is still here, they asked, we kind of went over the topic, but let's just revisit it. So it says, what are your thoughts on using gene testing for mental health drug effectiveness for those patients who are treatment resistant, such as, I think they were trying to say GeneSight. So again, my concept to that, just in summary, if you missed it a few minutes ago, I'll be brief here. Otherwise, you can go back and watch it, rewind a few minutes for the person who messaged me, is, it's just, I'm not opposed to GeneSight testing. Like I said, I gave that one anecdote of how it really did make a difference, like a dramatic difference in this one patient, but I also kind of tempered expectations that for many people, it might just give you kind of more gray and it might not give you a concrete answer of what to do. So here's the simplest way I would put it. I would say for many patients who do GeneSight testing, and I know those companies will disagree with me, but I'm just going to say it. most patients will get kind of a murky result. They'll say, some of these enzymes you're slightly above average at metabolizing, and some of these you are slightly slower, use with caution. You might have this gene, and if you're of European descent, this one med might not work as well. Again, might. And if you have this gene and you're this ethnicity, it might work better. Unfortunately, a lot of people get that kind of result. And then you're kind of left with, okay, well, use caution, might. And people get frustrated because, like, well, I spent money on this, or I had to, my insurance covered 70%, I still have to pay 30%. And that's where it gets frustrating. Now, again, you might be someone who's in the smaller percentage where it says you are a ultra, ultra, ultra rapid metabolizer. Because of that, these drugs may just literally never even get to an effective level. Avoid those, use these. That's when it's useful, right? Or the opposite. You metabolize these so damn slow that a tiny dose, maybe even used for like a pediatric patient, might be the equivalent of a whopping dose. And that's why every time you've tried average doses, you've gotten so ill from side effects, right? So, and again, that may be 10% on either spectrum. So again, it's all about perspective. If you're like, it's worth it to me to see if I'm in those fractional percentage of people in case it is going to be a very concrete recommendation I might get, yeah. But you may also get kind of that murky gray result. So again, to me, it really just comes down to cost. If your insurance is going to cover most of it or all of it, or you're going to have some nominal thing, then what's the harm in getting in some information? And maybe by chance, you will get some clarity with a few concrete suggestions and warnings. But if you find out like you're going to be shelling out hundreds of dollars out of pocket, or let's say you have crap insurance and you're going to have some huge portion you're going to have to pay, I think you got to really sit there and make a calculated risk, okay? Because do you want to now be stressed out that you're that much more in the hole financially if you got to cover a huge portion of it, right? So I just think it's really going to come down to that. If it's, like I said, if it's covered, minimal cost, and just go do it. Go do it. There's no harm in doing it, in my opinion. It's literally a Q-tip that you swab the inside of your cheek and they mail it off. I mean, it's a not super invasive process. So, follow-up question from the same commenter. It says, if SSRIs or SNRIs triggered a manic episode for the first time, what's the dangers or risk of stopping SSRI versus continuing it but adding a mood stabilizer into their med plan? And P.S. GeneSight is free right now for low income and Medi-Cal. Well, on the second comment, like I said, great. If it's free and you're eligible for the free, go do it. Absolutely, go do it. Like I said, there's no harm in getting extra information. So to your other question, it's more complex, but I'll answer that. And then if you got anyone else who's still on the stream, I see at least 7-8 other people. Throw in your last minute questions. This is going to be a little bit of a long answer, and then I will try to get to those if I can, but let's talk about this. So the question was, if a SSRI or SNRI triggered a manic episode for the first time, what are the dangers of stopping said SSRI or continuing it with a mood stabilizer in a plan? So again, we're going to speak generally here, okay? So that's a tricky question. Like, let's say you are someone who took a SSRI or SNRI, right? Like a Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro, right? And you and again, you got to rule it. We're just going to assume for the sake of simplicity, you've ruled out other things. Like, you're not on drugs, you're not doing cocaine, you're not doing methamphetamines, you're not doing speed or snorting Adderall that would look like a manic episode, but it's really more of a drug induced kind of thing, right? So let's assume all those things are ruled out, right? And really what it boils down to now is a couple factors, right? Are you someone who has had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and that undiagnosed bipolar disorder has now been unmasked by being on an SSRI or SNRI alone in the absence of a mood stabilizer, because that can happen. Someone who has known bipolar disorder, it is a no-no to use SSRIs and SNRIs alone in the absence of mood stabilizers, because it could either trigger a manic, hypomanic, or mixed episode, or it can actually worsen someone's depression. It could swing you in either direction, right? So one debate would be, is that a sign that one has had bipolar disorder this entire time, undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, and now it's being unmasked? That is one possibility, okay? The other possibility, and this is where it gets complex now, is I would say small, I wouldn't say large, but there is a small percentage of patients where they genuinely had like a manic or hypomanic phenomenon happen, literally as a chemical side effect of the SSRI or SNRI, but if not on it, doesn't ever happen again, meaning it was truly isolated as a actual side effect of the SSRI, and not indicative of unmasking some underlying bipolar. That's where it gets very tricky. How does one tell? That's the hard part, because there is no genetic test, there is no brain scan, there is no EEG, there is nothing definitive that will say one has or does not have bipolar disorder. So it really, I hate to say it, and I know it's going to sound generic. I know it's going to sound generic, but it's going to take a judgment call between you and your prescriber of how do you want to approach it, right? And you're going to have to weigh the risks and the benefits of what's happening in your life to say either we have other evidence to say maybe there is enough suspicion. Now, in retrospect, when we look at your history, maybe some of the other hints that we've seen over time, we didn't feel that there was enough, but now combined with the fact that there was some kind of manic or hypomanic event, maybe this whole time, some of those other subtleties we've seen, this whole time, this is evidence that maybe there was a bipolar. And if you and a prescriber go down that path, then, it probably makes sense to probably alter your treatment, in all honesty, right? Like to put you on a mood stabilizer. And when I say mood stabilizer, these are things like lithium, Depakote, lamotrigine, Tegretol or carbamazepine, to be a staple treatment, right? And then SSRIs or SNRIs are really going to then only be used sparingly here and there when episodes of depression are there. The hope would be, it doesn't always work out this way. It only works out for 1/3 of patients, but 1/3 of patients might be able to just get away with just the mood stabilizer alone, right? Versus, again, the other route would be if it's not felt that this was consistent enough to say maybe this was some kind of unmasked bipolar disorder, then the treatment would be, again, taking a gamble and a risk, calculated risk, that there's some faith that this is not bipolar. And then it would really be a matter of trying a different agent, right? You'd still have, in that case, you'd have to still get off the agent that caused this or was thought to be the cause of it, and then switch to something else, and hope that the next one doesn't produce the same results. Now, if the next one produced similar results, then yeah, then I think that's telling, and then maybe you have more evidence that, it maybe then you're still going to end up circling back to the fact that maybe this is some kind of bipolar disorder. So hopefully that helps a little bit as a general concept, but it is complex because, again, I wouldn't say it's very common that SSRIs induce mania, hypomania when there is no underlying bipolar. It's possible and it does happen, but I wouldn't say it's a super common thing. So I would say it would be concerning. It would be concerning, right? And you would at least have to weigh the possibility that there may be some type of underlying bipolar condition. But again, you need to speak with your own prescriber. I'm just telling you more in general theory. That's what would be going through the mind of kind of your typical standard psychiatrist. So looking at the time, guys, it's almost midnight here in Illinois. I got work tomorrow, but I appreciate you. Started off a little slow and then got very lively. Let's see, Carrie here, real quick. One question came in: are there cases where you advocate hormone replacement therapy like testosterone or progesterone? Not a lot. Not a lot. I mean, not a ton of times. That's my straightforward answer, Carrie. But am I opposed to it? No. I mean, I've had some, let's say in particular, I've had some men over the years where they've augmented our treatment on their own accord. They talk to their family physician or endocrinologist, and they've maybe gone and sought some, testosterone gel or testosterone replacement therapy. And they swear up and down that that's what got them over the hump and made their depression resolution accelerate. And who am I to argue, right? I mean, I do think there is evidence that certain, not all, but certain individuals may respond, to hormone based treatments because, look, the opposite is true as well, right? If you were to look up even oral contraceptives and, testosterone, you'll see that it can cause the opposite too. We can worsen irritability, we can worsen mood fluctuations and volatility. But I also do believe that in some folks we can improve it, right? I mean, look, how many individuals, right? I'm just using this as a generic example, will say that they have a pretty significant and really like clockwork cyclical premenstrual dysphoric phenomenon, like that week before menstrual bleeding. They'll say, look, it's like clockwork, right? My mood gets horrible. I get irritable, dysphoric, not just sad, like dysphoric. I'm in the depths in the valley of melancholy, sadness, hopelessness. I'm crying. I'm irritable, I'm edgy, I get overwhelmed, and then boom, I start bleeding, and then within a day or two, it's like gone. It's almost like it never happened. And then we get them on, let's say an IUD, let's say some kind of, progesterone-based implant, etc. And then by controlling that monthly cyclical, hormonal fluctuation, wow, right? That clockwork premenstrual dysphoria much better. Sometimes almost gone, right? So again, I mean not exactly what you're asking, but I'm saying the premise is on that spectrum though, right? There is a connection, right? Not all, but some individuals may respond to certain hormonal interventions like that, right? So I think it just depends, not to sound generic, but case by case. For some individuals, it may be appropriate. For other individuals, the risks and the side effects, again, no matter what it is, even water, right, has side effects, right? So hormonal treatments have side effects, right? We can't also look at them as being benign. So as generic as I sound, it's going to be case by case to weigh the risks and the side effects of is it worth it? And is there enough benefit to outweigh whatever side effects are happening for that particular, chemical for that particular individual, right? So but yeah, there is a role for certain individuals where it can help. So hopefully that somewhat answers your question, Carrie. So again, guys, appreciate you. If you like this format, make sure to leave it in the comments. And in the future, we could take some breaks from some of the more topic heavy live streams and mix in some of these open-ended Q&As if you kind of like this format. I think it was kind of engaging and lively towards the last half hour. So but yeah, it's fun. I like being interactive with you guys, especially, for those of you who are regular listeners. I appreciate you, like Carrie, Dennis, for those of you who joined. And thank you for some of the new folks. It's nice to have some, fresh faces, fresh blood in the mix. And so appreciate you guys for joining. Thank you, Megan, for subscribing. But yeah, we'll wrap it up. And again, we do these live streams Tuesday and Saturday nights, 10:30 Central, 11:30 Eastern. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I do try to mix in some evergreen content on the regular video catalog list. I've been slacking there. I'll try to put out some evergreen videos. I've been meaning to do an evergreen video on non-electrical seizures. So, psychogenic non-electrical seizures. So folks who have these unconscious, subconscious attacks of seizure-like activity that end up actually not being epilepsy. So if that sounds intriguing to you, I can definitely put that out there on an evergreen video. Maybe we can even talk about that together on an upcoming live stream. I haven't forgotten, people have been asking me to do a talk on TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. Yes, sounds like witchcraft. Magnets to treat mental health disorders, but that is a thing, and that has been a thing for over a decade now. So I'll not forget about those things. I'll try to put those out there on some upcoming evergreen videos, or maybe even on one of our live streams. So okay. Well, thank you guys for joining. I hope you guys had a good night. Try to get some sleep. I got to get some sleep at some point tonight, hopefully soon. But thanks for joining the Insomniacs live stream, and I'll catch you guys next time. Have a good night, everybody.